Hi, I'm Jenna.
And I'm Erin.
And welcome to Between Two Filing Cabinets, where we bring you tips, trends, troubles, and stories from HR.
That's right. And Jenna, we've seen an uptick in employee engagement surveys, members who are looking to tap into that resource. And so we thought it would be a good topic for today. What are some of the benefits of having an employee engagement survey, Jenna?
Yeah, I think now is a good time to be looking at engagement. We're seeing more companies that are. And some of the benefits, it gives you a good benchmark for maybe specific goals that you have for your organization. So that you get not only that sort of organizational perspective and kind of what do we look like as an organization, what are we thriving at, what are our areas, for improvement, but then you can also break down that data to really isolate, to see, like, hey, here's a department that's really strong, really thriving. They have a lot of, they don't have a lot of turnover. They're really productive. So what's going so right in that department? And then maybe we look at other departments and go, gosh, that department has a lot of turnover. They have a lot of employee issues. What's going on there? So it gives you both sort of the strengths that you have and, opportunities to say, well, how do we replicate that? Why are things going so right in that area? Contrasting with maybe there are other areas that aren't as strong. And you get that, if you're doing a full engagement survey, you should be looking at not only just employee satisfaction, so kind of what they're getting from the job, but you're also looking for contribution. So how much are they giving back? Okay. So you want to have both of those lenses, not just satisfaction. Because I could have high satisfaction because I get to sit and do online shopping, and no one tells me not to. So I might be like, hey, this is awesome, but I'm not really contributing at a high level. And so, and if you're looking at, well, where do we want to be a year from now, 2 years from now, 5, that gives you a really good benchmark of where you are, and then to be able to really put a plan in place for what are the things that we should expect, how are we going to get there.
And one of the great things about our engagement surveys, so many ways to slice the data, right, so that you can get that view of different kind of departments. And
when we do the engagement surveys, you get an internal glimpse, so you get your internal scores, but you also get compared to a norm. So let's say you're a manufacturing company, you'll get not only to see how you're doing internally, but you get that external comparison to other organizations in manufacturing to see how you compare to the rest of the world. So it's a really nice, and you oftentimes get very different stories, because you might say, like, hey, compared to other manufacturing companies, you're about average. But internally, this is one of your highest rated things. So it's really interesting that you get, the opportunity to look at both of those.
Interesting. So, I mean, for some people, they might say, well, you know what? We're just going to do our own internal engagement survey and kind of develop our own process. They might not get maybe those industry standards, but would they get the same benefits from doing it themselves?
I think you can get data. I think it's probably not as strong of data. I think when people see that someone internally is doing that survey, they may be less candid in their responses because someone internally is getting that data. So like when we do surveys for companies, no one from the company has any access to any individual survey. It's all handled outside. So I think that helps improve the quality of the data. It helps employee response rates. So while companies can do it internally, I think the quality of the information that you get back from employees isn't as good. And I've definitely seen you don't get as good of participation just in the numbers of people that participate. Comments, if you allow for open-ended and written comments, I find that they are less detailed, less candid in those comments. And so while it can be done internally, I would say if you're really kind of wanting the best information, I would recommend going outside and using someone that's really objective in the process.
Right.
Yeah.
And as a way to get that benchmark in the industry as well.
Yeah, because it is really important, because people they want to look at it and go, well, how do I compare to these other companies?
Right, making it more meaningful. Well, that's something for here, but what does that mean?
Yeah, and I've had conversations with companies. They're like, well, that's the average. So is that where we want to be? And if you don't have that comparison, you're like, no, we want to be at the top. We don't want to be average. We want to be better than that. We want to be driving these things, then they know they've got something to compare that to.
Right. No, I love it. So, I mean, those are some thoughts too. So, avoiding maybe the internal process. Any other words of caution about before kind of doing an engagement survey?
Yeah, I think probably one of the biggest ones is you got to get prepared to just kind of get a punch in the gut, because sometimes it's not good,
right.
And sometimes you get data that's really hard to swallow, and you might have a supervisor that's really tanking. You might have some of your top leaders that are not doing very well, and so I'd say if you're going to do it, you have to be prepared that, hey, this could not be good results. These could be some bad results, but being prepared to do something about it anyways. Because sometimes companies, I've had situations where we've had that conversation. We're like, okay, we got to be prepared for anything, and we talk about like, what do you think might be issues might be, and usually there's not too many surprises. But I've had some where companies have had some pretty, challenging results, and then they just kind of defend and justify and don't do anything.
Which is the worst. I mean, I've seen that in situations too, where after an engagement survey, there are, you do get this really meaningful, critical feedback, and then to just sit on it and do nothing,
right.
You can basically bet your engagement scores are going to go down.
Oh yeah, and I've had that happen where companies, they're in denial, or they're like, well, they only think this because of ... Like
right.
That ... in your justification, that's their reality. That's what they're telling you. Have to pay attention, and if you ignore it, you can guarantee that your score next time is going to be worse. So it is a little frustrating when companies aren't prepared for that gut check, even if we have that conversation and then we have those results and then they just continue to kind of ignore them.
Such a shame, because it's such a great opportunity. I mean, you should be thankful that you're getting that kind of feedback and that you have gotten that kind of candor in your responses, because now you can actually do something.
Yeah. So I would say that's definitely a word of caution, is if you're going to do it, you have to do something with the results. You have to put a plan in place, as tough as it may be. I mean, and that might be, here we have a supervisor who their departments had 60% turnover. And, what are we going to do about that? Because, I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons. It's not, if you're doing a survey, it's not just to, let me kind of backtrack. A lot of times it's the easy thing to do is go, where are all the problems? Right? Our brains kind of go, okay,
sure.
Here's the problem. Let's focus on those. And so you want to deal with those problems, but not always at the expense of your strengths.
Yeah.
And so what I always tell organizations is, yes, we do need to deal with the problems, but let's look at where the hot spots are in terms of where's their energy, where's their enthusiasm, where's their that strength, and how do we, why is it that way, and how do we replicate that in other areas? Because sometimes those things that you identify as your strengths can then help in that department that's really struggling.
Absolutely. Got to have that appreciative inquiry kind of approach.
Yeah. Right. And and sometimes companies are like, well, what do I do? Like, what happens if I find out, like, gosh, there's this supervisor, or there's this manager, and they really seem to be the common factor in here in this department compared to everyone else. What am I going to do with that person? And it's easy to ignore it, but they're, and do something meaningful, right? That's not just like, well, I think I need to get them some leadership training, or I think I need to get them some, training on accountability and delegation. Those are all good things, but they might not be really specific to that person.
Or specific to the people that they're leading. I mean, who knows where that disconnect is.
Right. So, some of the things that, we've kind of talked about when we've worked with companies is how people analytics can help you. And so, our partnership with Predictive Index can really help when you identify those things, because it provides a really supportive way of helping that person find success.
Yes.
And so if we're able to see through, their sort of native drives and behaviors, like, hey, this person, they have a high need to be in control. They're independent, they're autonomous, they're very task-oriented, and this job requires a lot of collaboration, getting people's buy-in. That helps us through something like the Predictive Index to be able to identify, here's a big gap that we have.
Yeah. No, what I love about predictive index in particular is the ability to make it less personal. Right. And so I can take a look and say, hey, it's not you necessarily, it's the fit, right? Maybe this is what's needed for this role, and this is where you are, right? And we can look at that and with this kind of neutral lens, right? We can also look at the people that you're managing too to see what's going on at that team and that department, so that we can take a really nuanced look and not just have a bunch of guesses as to why things are maybe not going so well in that area.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, because otherwise you're just doing guesswork and you could be wrong.
Oh yeah.
And that gives you such a tangible tool to help support that person who maybe they're looking at it and going, my job is on the line. And their job might be on the line. I mean, that could be the reality. But using something like predictive index gives such a great tool to say, you know what, here's why we think these things are happening, and here's your team, just what you were just saying.
Yeah, this is specifically what they need, not just I'm going to pull you aside and be like, hey, your numbers aren't so good. You need to
do better.
You need to do better. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I can give you some meaningful feedback and put an actual action plan in. It's based on you, based on the position, and based on the people that you're leading.
Yeah. So, and I think, kind of getting back to where we started and talking about the uptick in engagement surveys, I think now is a really good time to do it, especially as, employees are more mobile right now, and people are more willing to go and look for other places of employment. And so it's really important that you do examine that work experience that people are having, so that you can make sure that you continue to do all the awesome things that you're doing, do them even better, and then also be able to spot like, hey, this is a potential reason why people are leaving us, and what do we need to do about it. And so when we're in a market where it's an employee's market, it's not an employer's market, using a tool like this can really help you give that benchmark and some specific things that you can do then to help improve in those areas, and keep being known as a great employer, and an employer that employees seek out when they're looking for opportunities, rather than you having to go and seek them out.
Absolutely, building that brand.
Yeah.
Right. So if people are interested in our engagement survey, what steps should they take?
Yeah, you can contact me. It's jreed@cascadeemployers.com. You can visit our website. We've got information on there. You can call me as well. And so happy to chat with you if that's something that you are looking at.
Cool.
All right, well, let's file this one under engagement surveys.
Seems to make sense.
All right.
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Bye.